One of the things that's become clear to many of us, especially when it comes to performance, is that there's underlying issues that um, pretty much everybody has, but it really hasn't been acknowledged. Whether you want to be say it nicely and say unresolved emotional issues, or use terms like trauma or PTSD. I don't think that it's possible to make it to be 18 years old and not have some kind of, at least what's referred to as small t traumas. And causes us to become stuck, and we avoid this, or we change our pattern, and we avoid things, and that's not necessary.
Welcome to She Coaches Coaches, the podcast where we have thoughtful, honest conversations about what it really takes to build a thriving coaching business. I'm your host, Candy Motzek, and before building my business, I spent years as a senior corporate leader. Now, today, I work with coaches who are smart, well trained, and deeply capable, and who want clarity about how to grow in a way that feels aligned and financially sustainable. On this show, I sit down with successful coaches to explore the real decisions behind their success, how they got started, what shifted as they grew, and the mindset and business choices that helped them gain momentum without burning out. Whether you're early in your coaching journey or refining a business you've already built, She Coaches Coaches is here to offer perspective, confidence, and grounded insight to support your next chapter. To learn more about how I work with people, go to my website, stepintosuccessnow.com. And now let's dive in. Hey everyone, I am so glad you're here and welcome to this episode of She Coaches Coaches. I'm Candy Motzek, and I'd love to introduce you to my guest, Dr. Tom Rohrer. He directs the Brain and Body Performance Center in Colorado Springs. He's a mental performance coach and consultant, a psychotherapist, and a trainer. And Tom assists athletes and public performers to neutralize their mental blocks and achieve their best performances. He offers webinars including the Big 10 Plus Peak Performance Traits, and he is currently authoring the upcoming book, Beyond Peak Performance. Tom, welcome to the show. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So tell me, what are you most excited about right now in your work and business?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. I've been putting together um, a number of things which are resulting in some webinars, which I'm excited about. But I think in general, I'm most excited about the approaches that I've been able to learn and offer that are really make the process of creating a person who wants to be a top performer much easier and quicker than people realize, that it's much more doable. Approaches like brain spotting, polyvagal theory, things like that that make the process just dramatically easier than has been true of 20, 30, 40 years ago when we were still struggling with how to help people.
That sounds like a whole voice of hope for people. And it really creates this area of possibility, right? Like
Yeah.
there are some people that maybe this is the chance for them to dream again.
Yeah. One of the things that's become clear to many of us, especially when it comes to performance, is that there's underlying issues that pretty much everybody has, but it really hasn't been acknowledged. Whether you want to be say it nicely and say unresolved emotional issues, or use terms like trauma or PTSD. I don't think that it's possible to make it to be 18 years old and not have some kind of, at least what's referred to as small t traumas, right? The breakup of our first love, or just stuff that happens that makes, and we hold that commonly, maybe somewhat consciously, often unconsciously, and causes us to become stuck. And we avoid this, or we change our pattern, and we avoid things, whatever it may be. And that's not necessary, right? Those things can be dealt with fairly quickly compared to even the traditional talk therapies, which kind of came about in the 60s and 70s. Now we have things like brain spotting, where we know it's neurologically based, and that where you look will not only change how you feel about an issue, but can help your brain and body just naturally process it for you rather than even have to do any real work. I've literally had clients who I, of course, had been working with, but they walked in the door and said, "I'm ready to deal with this issue. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to tell you what it is." We did brain spotting. They processed it. We were done, and they said, "Thank you. I'll see you next week." And I didn't know what the topic was.
Cool. Tell me what brain spotting is. That's a new topic to me. I don't know about it. And so I'd love to hear more.
Interesting enough, it's been around for over 20 years. It came out of a tool, an approach called EMDR. And it basically, I've noticed that in themselves or someone else who is talking about something, probably a monologue of some sort. They're talking about some issue and they're going on and they're staring someplace at a most simple level. That is a technology of brain spotting. Because when you locate in your visual field where this issue is in your brain, your body and brain will just process it,
That's
right?
so
And
interesting.
so one of the things a guy named David Grant, who was an EMDR trainer at the time, discovered doing EMDR was if he held the person stare, he actually was able to process something which he had been the client had a very difficult time processing. She was an ice skater. And once he did that, not knowing even what he was doing, this skater called him back a couple days later and said, "I can do that technique, no problem at all without falling." He kinda went, "Well, okay, so what did I discover here?" So you can in that first book that he wrote called Brain Spotting, he talked about he calls self-spotting. And so based on that, what I just mentioned, that if you happen, let's say spontaneously, you happen to notice you were thinking or talking about something and you are staring someplace, just keep doing that. Just hold that gaze if you notice where it is, and you also if you notice where you're feeling the strongest sensation in your body, that also can help too. But just holding that gaze and continuing to think about it or talk about it, you literally will process. If it's a so I like to use the term evolve. If it's an issue which is negative, such as a trauma or a negative thing that happened, it will evolve it towards neutralization. So it kind of drains the energy out of it. If it's something which is positive, like as you asked what am I excited about, for discovering that it's gonna more integrate it. It's gonna make it something that's you're more connected to. So in that case, you might be using it to connect with various kinds of performance traits. There's a common term that's more and more common today called strengths, the idea of
Mm.
knowing your strengths. And if you had a, for instance, you said to yourself, I wish I was more assertive, or I wish I was more courageous. Let yourself go into an experience where you had some level of courage or had some level of typically most of us can come up with some time that we were a little bit courageous and just sit with that. Notice where you're looking. If that doesn't work as quickly as you'd like to, you can do a kind of a matrix patterning where you look over here and there and all the time kind of noticing, am I feeling it more connected or more intensely when I'm looking here than here? And at some point you're going to go, it's kind of more over here. Now, at first, it may not be real strong. It may just be still slightly more intense here. Just sit with that. It doesn't have to be major difference, but as long as you know that that's the spot where you feel more intensity or more connectedness. Um, obviously, it's going to be helpful to work with somebody, but you can also do self spotting anytime, right? You can do it in the middle of the night if you suddenly realize you're thinking about something, and my gosh, it's like you can't go to sleep. And just notice where you're looking and hold that. And what may come up is a realization of what you've been not consciously aware of is something like to have a special event or whatever it might be. And then you can, I do at that point, is then just kind of get my phone and write down, make a alarm set so I can then just go, okay, so I don't have to think about that one anymore. And then allow myself to go to sleep or be more relaxed, whatever it may be. If it's, the middle of the day, I might then, okay, so now I can focus on.
What I like about what you've described here is that the body and the brain and us as a being, we know how to shed these things. Just like my dog, if my dog has a stare, there's a loud noise. She barks, she shakes it off, literally, and then she resets her nervous system. And that we as humans have that ability too. Instead of getting so focused on the have a problem and fixating on the problem, feeling somehow that it's not solvable, that it's something
Yep.
that's now part of your identity. And
Yep.
this makes it doable for people to move forward. I
Yep.
wonder if you're excited about this.
Yeah. There's another tool that's been around approach some 20 some years that I just heard about a few years ago and been using more and more. The concept is called polyvagal theory.
Yes, yes.
It's the idea that if you activate the vagus nerve, those who don't know, that's that giant nerve in the body that goes from your head down to your organs. And by stimulating that in one way or another, it causes your body to relax and feel safer.
You feel safe, less resistance to doing the next thing or just to being able to rest, right? Well, I can see
Mhm.
why you're so excited about this. Now, what
Yeah.
I'd love to know is when, like for you, how has this affected you? And like, what have you learned about yourself through doing this level of work?
Um, I came to figure out answers only about maybe 5, 6 years ago of why it was that I had um, not only anxiety as a young athlete, but also what these days is referred to as the yips or the twisties or the whatever name it is, where you just can't perform in a way. In my case, I was, what was it, ninth grade? I guess I was about 15. And I started double dribbling, playing basketball. And that doesn't happen too often. You're just not on the floor anymore. You're on the bench. And that was the last year I ever played basketball. And that was my most favorite sport as an athlete. And what I realized was spontaneously, I was actually in a training and I was planning on talking about and working on had to work on each other, right, to have somebody to work on. So I was going to present this idea, and it just came out spontaneously, and I started uh, uh, talking on it and then working on a trauma that I knew I had, but I didn't identify it as a connection to the uh, the performance issue that I had, where somebody that was important in my life lied to me, and then I came to the realization this person was not going to be the mentor that I would have hoped for. And so that connection was really helpful to be able to begin to release that. It didn't help me go back and become a freshman high school basketball player, but at least I knew the answer to what that was about.
And also to be able to start releasing it too. Yes, awareness is the beginning of everything, but how do we not get
Or
stuck? Right? How do you not get stuck,
yeah,
right?
I think what you said a minute ago is a really important point, and that is instead of saying, "Oh, I made a I made a mistake. I'm no good. I made a mistake. I'm learning." Right?
Mhm.
How do you reframe that positively? I love, the story about Michael Jordan not making his high school basketball team. I mean, there's lots of people out there, and other than the spectrum, there's he was a young man. I'm blanking on the theme right now. I'm guessing 50 years ago, maybe he was a Down syndrome young man who got really tutored strongly, and by the time he was 12, he could read, write, and type. By the time he was 17, he wrote his own autobiography, and I had to read it in a for a class, and literally every page had typos and problems, but you understood what he was saying, right?
Yeah.
And this is a kid, his parents were told to put him in an institution. That kid has influenced so many people, just through me alone. That book with other people I know they had Down syndrome kids to say potential is dramatically more than you think it is.
Isn't that the same, right? Like,
Mhm.
I mean, there's somebody who has an other ability that moved through a lot of growth and probably achieved far more than, society would have said was
Yeah,
possible. But so many of us are the same, right? How many
yeah,
things does every person listening to this show think I'm a something or I can't do that or we put our own limits on ourselves and to know what possible.
yeah.
There is so much more available to us.
Yep. My wife is hopefully about finished with a book, one of her 7 or 8 books, and it's called The Bitch in the Back, and it's about negative self-talk.
Ah,
And
okay.
it's
Yeah.
that exact thing. It's like, what did we who how do we get in this thread in humanity that when we got feedback we weren't accurate, that we started condemning ourselves? I mean, it just doesn't from a more positive psychology point of view, it just doesn't even make any sense.
No. And half the time we assume that that other event or that other person's opinion was right before we even
Yeah.
questioned it, before we
Yeah.
even said, well, wait a minute, what's the
Yep.
proof?
Well, the one I love is the metaphor. If we use that same approach for learning to walk as a kid, most people would be crawlers.
If that.
Oops, I fell down again. I fell. I just can't walk. I'm just stuck
Yeah.
away in my life. Of course, that's obvious. Nobody does that. Well, what do we do in other situations, especially when um, trying to think of the man's name who's the great motivational speaker who got labeled as mentally retarded, uneducatable
Mm,
as a kid, and he's one of the best motivational speakers I've ever heard in my life.
yeah.
Name is the tip of my tongue, but just one person said to him, "Don't you ever take somebody else's opinion and accept it as your whole reality."
Exactly.
It's
Let
just
me
it,
ask you this. I've
so,
got another question for you. What advice would you share with someone who is earlier in the journey? You know, like you take somebody who's 25 years old and they're getting started out. What advice would you share to help them have an easier go of it?
well, one of the there's a lot of things a person can be doing, but one of the things that's I think the most powerful, not only in general the field of positive psychology, but you can go online to a site. It's I know my what I use and gets to it is authentichappiness.org and take a free 40 about a 45-minute assessment. It was called the VIA assessment of character strengths, and it'll give you your top 5 strengths. Amazingly enough, which didn't shock me when I first heard it, I found out curiosity is my number one. And curiosity is one of the most important successful traits that there is. But whatever the person said, you can go there, you take 45 minutes, it's free, and you find out what are your top strengths. Start using those strengths in your life. And if it's curiosity, then find things you can explore. If it's bravery, think about how you can use courage to how you have already and begin to build and build and build. Again, everybody has so much more potential.
And some
The
of it is
universe,
just having that courage to claim that dream, right? So
yeah, let
your
go of the
advice
fear.
is to go and take that. It's the
Yeah.
via character strengths or via strengths.
I think it's via assessment of character strengths. If you go to authentichappiness.org and then just take this and you don't have time to do more than 5 strengths anyway. There's
Well,
24 that stand on their own as being uh, desirable. Just if
take the
you,
test, learn your strengths, lean into it,
yep.
master and practice the strengths that you already have. That is great advice. All right. So, as we're getting ready to wrap up, I have one question for you. People who are listening to this episode, what is the one idea that you hope that they will carry away after listening to this conversation?
You can perform, I use that word generically, perform, whether you're an athlete or you want to be a public speaker or you just want to be a competent person in the world. You can perform not only as well as you think you can perform better.
I have
Mm.
so enjoyed the conversation. Can you share with the listeners how they can find out more about you?
Sure. Probably the easiest way just to go to either go directly to my website, which is my name, tomrohrer.com, or email me at DRTOM, Dr. Tom at tomrohrer.com. And I'll be glad to respond.
Lovely. Thank you. And I'll make sure to put those links in the episode
Thank
notes. Thank you so much, Tom. I've enjoyed the conversation very much.
you, Candy.
All right,
Thank you.
everyone. That is it for this episode. What a fascinating episode. And what a practical way for us to look at some of those small t trauma that maybe you decided was a problem. And Tom here has shared some great ideas on how you can start to address that so that you can perform better in whatever your chosen field is. Thanks again. And we'll be back to speak to you again on the next episode. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of She Coaches Coaches. If this conversation resonated, take a moment to reflect on what stood out and how it connects to where you are right now. Coaching businesses grow through clarity and thoughtful choices, not pressure or hustle. If you'd like more support, you can learn more at stepintosuccessnow.com. I'll put the link in the episode notes. And if you found this episode helpful, I'd appreciate it if you would share it with a peer or colleague who would enjoy it as well. I appreciate you being here. Have a great day.